over its body other than the face itself.
There are, in fact, 4 different types of, what we think of as Sasquatch or Bigfoot.
Very wide, pronounced nose. There was also a very ominous odor.
Phase 1 is to identify opportunities. I walked into a small clearing in less than 10-15 feet away from this enormous creature, and it scared the living hell out of me. Phase 2 is conducting investigations both of witnesses and locations. The size of the thing, it was 4 or 5 feet across the shoulders. Phase 3 is profiling research areas, what's there, how they move, feeding, things like that. About 8 feet tall, I guessed around 800 pounds. It was massive. I had no idea that anything like that existed. Phase 4 is create an intercept plan. I decided to shoot in the air to see if maybe it would scare it off. Phase 5 is the intercept and resolve the issue phase. It didn't do anything, didn't react, and then I heard a noise from my right rear, and from out behind some brush come another one and walked over by the first one. That's when I decided to do what the dog did. I took off running. Welcome to Witness of the Unknown. Hello everyone. Today I'm speaking with Bill.
Yep.
Bill, how are you, my friend?
Pretty good. How you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Well, what I like to do is to pretty much give witnesses the microphone. So take me through the beginning, what you were doing, how all this started, and kind of lead me through the events.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see. Where do I begin here? Well, I live in Oregon, obviously, most of my life, and the experiences that I have had have taken place over probably about a 35-year period. And I spend a lot of time in the outdoors, camping, hunting, hiking, that sort of thing. I mean, a lot of time. I love being out there. But I'll just kind of start at the beginning. And my family, when we moved to Oregon from Idaho, I guess I was probably about 8 years old, and we found this mountain resort on a lake, Cultus Lake in Central Oregon, and we enjoyed staying there for many, many years. And I guess one of the first things I remember about that location, and I must have been about 10 or 11 at the time, but we had taken a walk up to the deck of the resort after dinner one night, and coming from the south side of the lake at around a location known as Mackinac Point, we heard what a lot of people describe as that horrible drawn-out scream that kind of starts out low and then pitches high and then fades down into low again. So that definitely creeped us out, and we headed back to the cabin for the night and kind of talked about what we thought it might be, and we all agreed that there's no known animal that makes that kind of sound. And obviously we were familiar with the notion of Sasquatch. So that was kind of interesting. But moving forward, the first actual sighting I had taken a hike up to the top of Cultus Mountain, and by this time I was probably in my early 20s or so. It was a little bit later in the afternoon, and I was sitting up at the top of the mountain where the fire watch tower used to be, and a little bit of movement out of the corner of my eye caught my attention, and when I turned to look, just literally for maybe 1 or 2 seconds, I caught a glimpse of something moving behind the trees, and what I saw looked like the backside of some kind of human figure, except it was covered in kind of a brownish gray hair, and really all I got to look at was the neck and the shoulders and the back, and you could very clearly see the muscles on this thing. You know, the deltoids in the shoulder and the outline of the shoulder blades and that huge muscle going up on either side of the head, known as platysma. And then you could see the curvature of the spine. And but within a couple seconds, the thing was behind the trees, and whatever it was pretty large. And about that time, I thought, well, I think I better get out of here. And,
yeah, that would be the cue.
Oh, geez, man. Going back down that mountain, I was, looking around everywhere, behind me and off in the woods and whatnot. So, yeah, that was my first actual sighting of what I believe was one of these, and I'd later find out that, yeah. But I guess the second instance was many years later, and I was camped out at the west end of the lake with my dad one spring, and we're just sitting around the fire at night, and he says, well, I gotta go use the bathroom, so he headed up to the outhouse, which was probably about 50 yards from our camp, and so I just sat there, and I guess a couple minutes later, I heard him call out from up there. He said, "Hey, Bill, is that you walking around up here?" And I yelled back, "No, I'm still down at camp." And he says, "Well, something big just walked by here, and it seemed to be in a pretty big hurry." And so I turned on my flashlight and started shining it back in the woods. And I'm not really sure the distance. It was probably about 50 or 60 yards. I saw this pair of hair-covered legs moving through the forest quite rapidly and very long strides. And that was all I saw of that. I don't know why it didn't occur to me to shine the flashlight higher, but it didn't. And so, yeah, that was pretty weird. And he got back down to camp, and I told him what I'd seen, and he says, well, there's probably some guy running around up here in Carhartts or something. And I said, no, whatever it was had hair on it. It definitely wasn't a pair of Carhartts, and who the hell goes running around the woods in the middle of the night with no light?
Right.
So, yeah, that was the second instance. And I guess the third and most amazing experience, once again, a couple of years later, I was camped out south of Sisters up in the Three Creeks Wilderness area, and there's a gravel quarry up there that's a popular place where people go to shoot, and it's also just kind of a nice place to camp out. So I was sitting around the fire at night, and there happened to be a small herd of mule deer foraging, about the camp, and that was kind of cool to watch them. And I noticed that the deer suddenly took off. They weren't at a full bolt or anything, but definitely a fast trot. Mm-hmm. And I got this weird feeling that something was strange there. So I picked up my rifle and switched on my tactical light and started scanning around. And just to my 1 o'clock position, about 60 or so yards away, up on this slope, I see this pair of eyes staring at me. And this thing is standing behind a large ponderosa pine, just kind of swaying back and forth, as I'm shining the light on it, and I couldn't make out any distinct features, face or anything like that. Just a very vague outline. But I mean, this thing was huge. It had to have been about 8-9 foot tall. And so after about 15 seconds of watching this thing, it turned, and now this slope goes up about 100 yards, and it's about a 45-degree angle, so it's very steep, and a lot of gravel, larger rocks, things like that. But this thing turned around and just started booking up that slope like it was nothing. And by then, I got a pretty good outline of the whole body, and it was definitely an upright hominid type creature, and it was just going up that hill, like it was nothing. Mm-hmm. But so I went out the next morning and went over to that spot where I saw this thing, and yeah, like I was saying, I guess it was probably about 8-9 foot tall, and I tried to walk up that slope, and after about 20 feet, I was winded. I thought to myself, no way, no freaking way. So yeah, just, in a nutshell, those are the bulk of my experiences over about a 35-year period. And I don't know if David mentioned it to you or not, but I do actually have a casting of a print that I found also up at Cultus Lake one spring.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I'd be interested to see that sometime.
Yeah, I got the picture. I'll have to email it to you. Yeah, no, it's camped out in the Big Cove on the north shore of the lake one spring, and toward the end of the week, I ran out of firewood, so I had to go find some more, and there happened to be a pile on the south end of the campground. So for the next couple of days, I'd be walking back and forth packing firewood, and I noticed this indentation in the ground, and the more I walked by it, I kept looking at it, and I finally stopped, and I thought, well, what the hell else could it possibly be?
Sure.
About close to 18 inches long. The pattern is very distinct, although I think that this print was probably made the prior season due to the pine needle debris accumulated in it. But so yeah, when I was packing out, I hiked back over to the lodge to get a rental boat, and I asked the owner, I said, "Hey, you guys got any plaster down in the shop that I can take with me?" And that was kind of a head scratcher for them, but I told them, well, I'll show you guys when I get back. And yeah, so I went back over and made a cast of this thing, and packed out, and when I was removing the cast, trying to be very careful of it, it ended up breaking in two pieces. There was a spot about 2/3 the back way from the front of the track that was a little bit thinner, and I believe that's what is known as the mid-tarsal break that is common in primates and these creatures. But yeah, it's I'll definitely shoot you a picture of that. Pretty interesting stuff. And yeah, that's kind of it for me.
I'm still thinking about, when you mentioned it swaying back and forth. That's a pretty typical behavior among primates when they're agitated. So you must have interrupted the deer hunt, most likely.
Yeah, probably. That's what I was thinking in retrospect.
Well, very interesting. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, that was pretty freaky to think that I was in between this thing and a herd of deer.
Yeah, probably not the best place to be, right?
Yeah. Go away, deer. Get out of here. Go somewhere else.
I know generally the area you're talking about, there's been a number of things that I've heard from that region, so interesting place for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And for listeners, a cast breaking is actually very common. Especially, I mean, if you don't know, I know the first time I cast prints, nobody told me what to do. Nobody told me you had to actually dig around the cast and pull it out that way, and then clean it later. I found some really great 17-inch prints in Skamania County on this logging road or on the side of it, and just, I used all the plaster I had and broke the cast all to pieces. I'm very upset at that even to this day because they were such great prints, but it happens. Even Roger Patterson, when he got his film in 1967, they cast 3 of the prints before leaving the area, and one of those broke also. So it does happen.
Mm-hmm.
Well, very interesting. Go ahead, Bill. Go ahead. One thing that I think about frequently is, you hear about a lot of experiences that are really negative and pretty terrifying in the end. And I don't know if I'm just lucky or if I haven't experienced that yet, but thus far there hasn't been any aggression or violence in my experience with these things. And I think I mentioned this to David, but I wonder if that's just on account of not running into the wrong kind yet. That could be, and it could be it depends on a couple of factors. Usually, the age and experience level of the individuals that you come across.
Right.
And of course, their disposition, things like that. But it seems to be when they get older, maybe have more experience around people, they get a little bit more aggressive. And then the opposite's true too. I mean, there's kind of a balance there. In very remote areas where there's very little human contact, they seem to be very aggressive. So I guess it really depends. Now, that area that you camp in there, do a lot of people go in that area?
Yeah, generally during the summer, but I'm usually up there in the off season, either spring or fall. And I try to go to places where I'm not likely to run into people. And that's the kind of camping I enjoy the most.
And it could be just the disposition of the individuals in that area that aren't, too aggressive.
Oh, you're still there, Will?
I'm here.
Oh, okay. You broke up for a second there.
Okay. It's just typically it's the disposition of the individuals in the area, oftentimes, that make them, aggressive or the behavior's not aggressive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting.
Well, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Not really. I'll send you some sketches that I did also, and one thing that David mentioned was, and I had to address this with him later, but looking at the sketches, he thought that that the thing looked kind of gangly or skinny, and what I told him was, I have a background in biology, and human anatomy and physiology being among that, and so the sketches were actually based on my knowledge of how a bipedal animal would look, based on. So I wouldn't say that the things I saw were super massive, but they weren't thin either. They're just maybe kind of an average body type, if you will. That's normal for that creature. That's the only way I can describe it. I'll send.
Okay. Yeah.
I'll send.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll send you those. I'll email you those pictures so you can get a look at it.
Okay, great. And that's not out of the question. I mean, they're not all. It's not cookie cutter. You get different individuals. You get the different varieties, or as my contacts call them, subspecies. So you get some variations, and then there are other things. Isolated groups and things like that, and poor diets or what have you. So, as you would expect within any kind of a species, you're going to have a lot of variations. So, yeah, that's definitely not out of the question.
Right. But so that's pretty much it for me.
All right, Bill. Well, awesome, and I certainly appreciate you sharing that with me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And by all means, stay in contact. And, if you see anything else, be sure to let me know.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting enough to me that I'll probably, spend a lot more time and pay a little closer attention to things when I'm out there, because I am actually really curious about this whole thing, and hopefully that doesn't put me in harm's way. But
well, let's hope not. And I can send you some things to watch out for also.
Yes.
There's some definitely behavioral things that you can that will alert you to their presence in an area.
Right. I've seen pictures of some of the stick structures and things like that. Trees bent over, and that's actually something. When I see that, I tend to, if I'm driving down the road and I start seeing trees bent over the road, that's a cue to me to, okay, maybe it's time to turn around and go the other way and not bother with that,
Right.
And that's actually fairly common out there, and I just consider that that's kind of their way of saying, hey, this is my space, this is my boundary. So,
well, all right, appreciate it again, Bill.
Yes, absolutely. And thanks for interviewing me. It's good to be able to actually talk to someone about this who's also into it.
And I tell people all the time, it's a big help for people to come forward and talk about what they've experienced, because it really helps other people who won't talk about it, come to terms with what they've experienced.
Yes.
All right, my friend. Well, thank you very much, and we'll chat again soon.
Yeah. Thank you, and have a good day.
All right, you do the same.
Yep. Bye.
Thanks, everyone, for joining me this week. Be sure to tune in again next week as we explore another account from a witness of the unknown.